Cloudia Leslie Wells was a single woman living in Maryville, Illinois. She was supposed to be taking care of her mother, who had recently broken her hip. But sometime in the middle of January 1995, Cloudia left, not letting anyone know where she was going. She was never seen. Actually, she was seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Do those words seem familiar to you? They should. They come from a very popular movie. Those words were in a letter that Andy Dufresne sent to his friend Red in the film The Shawshank Redemption. Ah, now you remember. Andy, played by Tim Robbins, and Red, played by Morgan Freeman, throughout the movie, they had vastly different views on the concept of hope. And in fact, Red called it a dangerous thing. We use the word hope on Unfound quite a bit. I use it. My guests use it. If you go to the Unfound podcast discussion group, you'll see listeners using it. I see the word hope in a lot of the emails that I receive. But still, covering missing persons cases can be an emotionally difficult pursuit. Statistically, we know most of the people we've covered on Unfound are deceased. And for many of the guests we've had on the program, odds are only a few of them will get the answers they're looking for. But I think this episode is different. I hope this episode will give you hope. And now, a summary of the case. Actually, there's not going to be a summary for this case. Mainly because during my preparation for this episode, I discovered that there were a couple key pieces of information that are incorrect on the public record. So if you've been to a couple websites reading about this case, I can almost assure you that what you read was wrong. Specifically, where Cloudia was last seen and why she was there. Those websites have gotten it wrong, and in fact, a recent show has gotten it wrong as well. Instead, what I'm going to do is allow Robin, Claudia's daughter, who is the interview for this episode, to explain those inaccuracies and how they might have come about in the first place. Unfound News. Mark the date. May 9th, 2017, 6 p.m., the Badere Beach Library. It's going to be the first Unfound meetup. Well, technically, that's not what it is. Really, I just haven't come up with a name for it yet. But I'm hoping to bring together a group of Pinellas County residents to start working on some unsolved missing persons cases in this area. Actually, some of these cases go back to the 1960s. I'm hoping to put citizen journalism and crowdsourcing to work. If you live in the area, I'd love for you to join us. If you don't live in the area, I will keep all of you updated on our progress. Next, the verdict is in. The people have spoken. Listeners have decided that Jeff Wantage's story regarding the disappearances of David Madot, Kent Monroe, and Omar Shearer isn't the truth. Although it should be known that the listeners believe what happened out there in the Gulf was an accident, not on purpose. If you still haven't voted, I'd still like to hear your opinion on the topic. Finally, some of you have requested putting Unfound on YouTube. I want you to know that it is something I'll continue to consider. The big issue is the upload time and my internet service, which can be sketchy on this island where I live, Madeira Beach. But I thank all of you who want to get Unfound heard and seen in as many places as possible. Where you can find Unfound. On Twitter, at Unfound Podcast. Instagram, also at Unfound Podcast. Join us on Facebook, the Unfound Podcast discussion group. You can interact with the guests and other listeners in a very civil and trollless atmosphere. You can email the show, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. And finally, please continue to mention Unfound at all of the true crime forums you visit, including Web Sleuths, Reddit, and podcasts we listen to. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound Robin Wells Burton, the daughter of Cloudia Leslie Wells. Robin, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you for having me today.
Robin, tell the listeners a little bit about your mother and growing up with her. What can you tell the listeners?
My mom had me at the age of 17. I came from a religious family. I never knew who my real father was. I still don't to this day. My mom, whenever I was 2 years old, my mom had went to my grandparents and asked my grandparents if they would adopt me. I think that she knew that was the best thing for me, and she wanted to make sure I was in a safe environment. Whenever my grandparents adopted me, my grandfather told her if she ever straightened up, she could always have me back. This is when my mother started leaving. She would leave. She would go. She used to go to Scottsdale, Arizona, as a kid growing up, and as well as other places around the United States. Then some I'm aware of, some I'm not. But she would come in and out of my life. She would be gone for a year or two, and she would come home for 2 or 3 months. Each time my mother left, she left with the clothes on her back, leaving all of her personal items at home. As a child growing up, I thought my mom was living the life of the rich and famous. I had absolutely no idea that my mom suffered a mental illness. My mom is paranoid schizophrenic. Back then, and even in today's society, and it's a sad situation. A lot of times those illnesses are swept underneath the rug. Families don't want anybody to know that their child is mentally ill. You have the mentally ill that doesn't want to let anybody know they're mentally ill because of the stigma that's placed on them. So I didn't know for many, many years. My grandparents thought it was best to protect me from her illness. I was angry when I very first found out, and I wanted to know why I wasn't educated. And it took me a while, and I realized, how can I be angry at them when they weren't educated themselves? Back then, when my mom would come home, she would have shock treatment done. We know now that wasn't a good thing. Back then, they thought that was a good thing. She would be in the hospital, and I wouldn't know why. I just thought that she was sick. I didn't know ever. Well, the last time I had seen my mother, I was 23 years old, and it was Christmas night. My mother, let me go back a little bit. I'm sorry. My mother came home. My grandmother had fallen and broken her hip, and she was placed into a nursing home. My mother came back and helped my grandmother through rehabilitation, and she took my mother and moved in with her. They got an apartment together in Maryville, Illinois. My mom did a great job taking care of my grandmother, but my grandma also had to have 24-hour care. I went home. I lived in Cape Girardeau, Missouri at the time, and I came home for Christmas. I had left Christmas night to return back to my home, but the last time I'd seen my mother was Christmas night. After returning home, I'd called my mother on the phone a few days later, telling her that how happy I was that she was taking care of Grandma, but the Grandma had to have 24-hour care, and that if she decided to leave again, that was fine, and I understood, but she can't just leave without telling someone. She had to call and let me know. She didn't tell me where she was going, but she had to tell me that that she was leaving my grandma because my grandma had to have 24-hour care, and she agreed. 2 weeks later, my mother left without telling me that my mother left, not telling me that my grandma was home by herself.
So she did something you told her explicitly not to do, unfortunately.
Yes, and unfortunately, I've never had a conversation like that with my mom. It was a good conversation, but I was very upfront and told her that if something happened to my grandmother, and she didn't tell me that she left, that I would never speak to her again. I've never said those words to my mother. in my whole entire life.
And what year was that? And how old were you? What year was that?
I was 23 years old, and it was probably late December or early of January. It was either late December of 1994 or early January of 95. My mom went missing the middle of January 1995.
Okay. Can I ask you a
Uh,
question about when she gave you up to your grandparents? Do you think that that was an acknowledgement that she knew that maybe she had a problem that maybe was going to affect her more as you got older? How do you look back at that?
yes, I do. I think that she was just she was afraid for my safety. I think that she wanted to make sure that somebody in my family took care of me. She didn't want to see me adopted out. She wanted to make sure it was a family adoption. I think that she did the best that she could.
Mm-hmm. And so she thought that she maybe felt something coming on, and so she thought, you know what, I need to allow her parents, your grandparents, to take care of you, to raise you,
Absolutely.
because she thought that was in your best interests.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And those times that she would come home and she left and your grandparents are raising you, did the grandparents ever ask her about, where she was going? You said about her going to Arizona, but you were under the impression that, she was going to Hollywood, living this, this glamorous life. Of course, you were just a young child at the time. Did anybody ever try to get her to stay or anything like that?
Absolutely. Every time that she came home, she was home for good, and I was the only one. I was very resentful towards my mother. I just, um, even though, even though I was never mean to my mother, I just always knew in my mind that she was going to be gone again. And I think I put up this wall to protect myself because I knew it was just a matter of time that she would leave again, that she hadn't straightened up. Um, and each time I was right, I'd be like to myself, I knew she would leave. I just knew she would be gone. And, as a child, because you don't understand, because nobody has educated you.
Sure.
I didn't know that she was sick. I just thought that she was leaving. There was a time that she took, if my grandfather died whenever I was 8 years old. It was in 1979. And my mother found out. And about a month or two after my grandfather had passed away, my mother had sent round trip plane tickets to Los Angeles, California, for me and my grandmother to fly out. When she picked us up from the airport, she had a dozen roses for my grandmother, a great big 40-foot stuffed animal dog for me. We got in a taxi cab. She took us to the mall. It was the first place she took us. She bought both of us brand new wardrobes. We were staying in Hollywood, California, at a motel that was costing $100 a night. Back in 1979, that's a lot of money.
It's a big deal.
Yes, so that's a very big deal. Um, I remember her taking me to Disneyland while I was out there. She was giving me $20 a day in allowance. I was a rich kid,
Mm-hmm.
She told me at the time she was writing songs for Willie Nelson about my grandfather. I know now that that's not true. Where she got this money, I still have no idea. But it was just once again, I thought that she was living the life of the rich and famous, and these are the reasons why.
And so now today, you're still on this day in March of 2017, all these years later, you still have no idea where she got that money, what she was doing back then. That's right?
Right, correct.
Okay. That's
Um,
interesting. Hmm.
yes, I remember one time I was in second grade, and the MPs came to my classroom with my principal. My mother had went into the military and went AWOL, but she had went into the military under her sister's name.
Huh.
And when she went AWOL, they came here to actually arrest her sister, and her sister had to explain to her, I never went in the military, and come to find out it was my mom. So she got a discharge from the Army. So my mom was never a veteran. My mom was, when my mom actually went missing again in 1998, it says that she was a veteran going to the VA. She was never a veteran.
Right. We need to correct the record on that because I've read that in a few different places that are very reputable missing persons websites, and I've read that a couple places. That is not
Yes,
that's not true. She was never a veteran. What status then did
absolutely
she
not.
have? She used somebody's ID to try to get into the military, or how did that all work? Explain that again if you
I
could.
well, my mom used to used to get fake driver's license. I mean, they were real. I remember a time whenever I was growing up where she went to the Christian bookstore and got and got a baptism record, and then went to the library and pulled up somebody that had died at birth, and she would get all this information, and she'd go to the driver's license bureau and get her face with somebody else's name. So I think that with her and her sister being so close in age, she already knew her sister's information. She just said that she lost her driver's license. Is what I would say.
Okay. That's interesting. Your mother sounds like a very interesting and intelligent person, Robin.
She is. She has a very, very high IQ.
Yeah.
Um, Never in a million years would I ever think that my mother was homeless. I was 34 years old when my mom's sister set me down and told me that my mom was paranoid schizophrenic. I didn't have any idea, and I think she was shocked. I don't know, how the wires got crossed, but she was like, I know that you knew, you just chose not to know. And I said, no, I never knew that. Nobody ever told me that. And that was the very first time that I realized that my mom was paranoid schizophrenic. It was 11 years after she had went missing. That's whenever I started the search for my mom began. I didn't
And
search for my mom.
that's not that long ago. You're not that old. You said 34 years old. You're not much older than that now. So that was a fairly recent development in your life to find that out.
It was about 11 years. I'm 46 now, so it was
So
about 11 years ago.
still, you lived three-fourths of your
Yes,
life thinking that
yes,
something else.
yes, yes. So I grew up hating my mother. I thought that my mom was living the life of the rich and famous. I had no idea that my mom was paranoid schizophrenic. Whenever I realized the truth, everything started making sense. Um,
Mm.
and I just started searching the web, and I started a Facebook page, and then my niece got a hold of me, and she said, Robin, she said, I don't know how we missed this. She said, I just got on NamUs, and I've put her name in there before, and nothing's popped up. She said, but you need to look at this. And she sends me a link to NamUs of a woman that had went missing out of California in 1998, 3 years after she had left home. The woman's name on NamUs was Leslie C. Wells. The birth date was off by a little bit. There was no photo, but something in my gut just told me it's her. I know that this is her. I contacted the San Diego Missing Persons Unit, and they told me that they actually had just put that up on NamUs a couple of months ago, that they actually have a picture of her that they had not put on NamUs yet. It was in her file, and they wanted to know. They wanted me to send pictures to them first to see if this was the same person. Then they sent me her picture back, and I knew immediately when I opened up the picture that it was her. She'd only been missing for 3 years at that time.
And what year did you find this out? That she turned up in this database. What year was that you found
Um,
out?
I want to say 2005, maybe 2006.
All right, so you went. So this was like 8 years after she'd have been put in this database. Then.
Right,
Wow.
right. But they didn't put her in. They had just recently put her in. They said.
Oh.
So I don't know why they waited so long, but they had just
Okay.
recently put her into NamUs.
And what did you
Um,
think was going on all those years? Just to remind the listeners, the last time that you saw your mother was approximately early 1995. Then you find out like 10 years later that she popped up in the San Diego area in 1998. What did you think was going on in those 10 years? Did you just think she just left and just never came back and you'd never see her again? Was it
yes.
That's what you thought?
I just thought that I would see her again, but so many years had passed that now I was worried because she had never been gone this long.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot different than before. Um, and I started researching. We started finding things, and even whenever I found where she went missing in 1998, I got the police report, and she went missing from a homeless shelter. But for even years after that, when I found this, I thought it was a battered women's shelter. I don't know why I thought that. I just did. I don't know if I was told that or I just thought that. And so I kind of kicked myself in the butt because I feel like I've been looking in all the wrong places. But I got the police report from San Diego, and whenever they go into the shelters, well, at least that particular shelter, they take a picture of each individual. If they come in there with medication, they write down the medications and their doctors. And they also get them to fill out an emergency contact form. Well, my mother had put me down as her daughter on the emergency contact form. She had put me down living overseas, and she did not have a number for me. Um, she was off 1 year on my birthday. But I think that what caught my eye on this report was the medications of the doctors, and it had the doctors listed, and these were doctors from Granite City, Illinois, which is about 10 minutes from my hometown. So my mom had been back here. She didn't carry that medicine around for 3 years. She had come back, and I think that when she came back, she didn't know where anybody was. Pretty much everybody had moved away, and she went to the funeral. I think that I personally believe that she went to the graveyard where my grandfather is buried. My grandfather and grandmother have a plot together, and whenever she went to the graveyard, she seen that my grandmother had passed away. My grandmother, by the way, passed away 6 weeks after my mom went missing. So I lost two very significant people in my life within 6 weeks of one another. I believe that my mother's scene when on the grave where my grandma passed away, and it was so close to the time that she left. In my mother's mind, I don't know how true this is, but in my mother's mind, I believe that she thinks that she's responsible for my grandmother's death, and I believe that she thinks that we blame her for that, which is so untrue. She had nothing to do with my grandmother's death. Matter of fact, my grandmother died in my home. My grandmother had been very sick.
Just so the listeners understand, what you're saying is that she left early 95. She might have gone to California and then come back to the Illinois area to get these prescriptions filled. You don't even know that she's there, and then goes back to California. So, that's quite a bit of distance to travel.
Well,
Maybe
I don't know if she went to California the first time.
Okay.
This was all in the police report in '98.
Okay.
So I know that she'd been back in this area. Where she went when she left here in '95, I have no idea. But we just know that she ended up in California in '98. And in 1998, they had the medicines listed on the police report with the doctors. So that tells me that she had been back in this area after she went missing from here in '95. Do you understand now?
Yes, I do. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So you found out about her when they finally sat you, to put it in your words, sat you down to tell you that she had paranoid schizophrenia. That happened around the same time that her name was discovered in this database, in around 2005. Those happened very close to each other?
Yes, they happened within months.
Wow,
within months, maybe weeks.
That's very interesting.
Very, very soon. Yes.
That had to be another, besides your mother disappearing, your grandmother dying 6 weeks later, obviously a horrible time in your life, but then 10 years later, to have those two things happen so close to each other, they must have really been an eye-opener for you.
Oh, it was a very big eye-opener. That's whenever I really just started searching for my mom, and I never, ever gave up on the search. At this point, I still don't realize that my mom was in a homeless shelter. I didn't realize that was a homeless shelter that she went missing from. So at this point, I still don't realize that my mom is homeless. Then in December of 2014, I get a phone call from...
Well, let's go back for a second. Let's try something this. 2005, you find ourselves... Take the listeners from 2005 up into 2014. What were you doing in that time? Were you trying to find her? I know that we're going to get to the really the recent stuff, but in those 8, 9 years, what were you doing?
I had set up a Facebook page. I was frantically searching. I never stopped searching. Once I started my search in 2005, I never stopped searching for her. I was on radio, the blog talk shows like we're doing now. I was on some of those. This was way before the picture was discovered.
Okay.
We already had a group called Leslie Wells Private Investigation. It was a private group on Facebook where all of us was searching for her. In December 2014, I received a phone call from my private investigator that has been working on this case for a few years now at this point. And he tells me, he said, Robin, I don't know how we missed this, but your mom's social security number was used in a homeless shelter in January 2013 in Santa Monica, California.
So he was.
I didn't,
So you didn't find this out until over a year after she'd actually used it. But still, it's great information. But it was a
oh,
little
it's
while.
almost 2 years. It was almost
Almost
2 years
almost two
afterwards.
years. Okay, almost 2 years.
Yes. This was January 2013. I find out in December 2014. Um, I didn't think too much about it. We've been on wild goose chases before. We have found her name and stuff, and it was years later. I did tell a customer of mine about it. Well, I didn't know it, but he goes home and he starts Googling that area. 2 days later, calls me on the phone. And he said, Robin, I need your email address. He said, there's something that you really need to look at. And I give him my email address, and he sends me an article. And the article is a February 2014 article from the LA Times talking about our homeless count on Skid Row, which is in Los Angeles. There was one picture that they had put on the front of this article, and that picture was of my mom. I knew immediately. I sent the pictures to her sisters. They didn't think it was her, and I just said, I know it's her. I know it's her. I just knew. The very next day, I put this picture on a flyer. My family was pretty upset at the time. They didn't. They hated the picture. They wanted it off the flyers. They felt sorry for this woman. I said, well, if it's not my mom, it's somebody's missing mother. It's somebody's someone.
Mm-hmm.
And until that woman comes forward and says that it's her, this will always be my mother. I just knew there was something about her eyes. Your eyes don't change. Your eyes don't change. And I just knew it was her. It wasn't until Monday I was able to get a hold of the LA Times, and they gave me the confirmation I needed, even though my mom used a different alias because she's known to use thousands of aliases. She used the name Diane Madago. I just knew it wasn't Diane Madago. I also had a friend of mine who works for the police station run Diane Madago, and there is a Diane Madago in California that is transit. But I received a picture of her, and it is not my mother. It is not the lady in the photograph in the LA Times as well. So on Monday, I get a hold of the photographer from the LA Times, and he tells me that even though it was in a 2014 article, and even though it said Skid Row, which is in Los Angeles, that actual photograph was taken during the homeless count in January 2013 in Santa Monica, California, the same year and month and city that my mom's social security number was used at a homeless shelter.
That had to be a very powerful moment for you, Robin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I knew. I already, it was my confirmation that I needed. It didn't matter at this point if nobody believed me or not. At this point, I knew I was right. And working with the homeless now, I will tell you right now, they age so fast out on those streets. And people don't look like they looked 20 years ago. And if you're out on the streets, they look even older.
Yeah.
You know, they're
Sure.
weathered, and it's a sad situation. Never in a million years did I ever think my mom was homeless. So this was a really big deal for me. I didn't have the funds to go, and Stephanie Copeland from Media of the Missing, she's out of Kansas. She said she'd never done this before. She said, but she just knew that she was supposed to take me to go find my mom. And she said that she started going into businesses, and a car rental place gave us a van for 3 weeks. Every restaurant that she would go in to tell our story, they started giving her food vouchers for us in California. It was food vouchers from Denny's and Burger King and Sonic. People were donating gas cards. The news, whenever we found out that we were going, the news came here the day before we left, and we started GoFundMe account. People just started helping us where we could fund the trip. So I'm going to California, and I know I'm going to see my mom. Let me tell you something, the shock of my life. I knew about homeless, but I didn't really know about homeless. And the first day that when we arrived, we were supposed to meet CNN out on Skid Row. The reason that we went to Skid Row first was because there was sightings of her coming out of Skid Row. Officer Dion Joseph, who runs Skid Row, he had told us of sightings that were coming out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So we hit Skid Row first with CNN following us around. I realized a lot of things very quickly. One was that they did not like the cameras. The homeless did not like the cameras, and they were very, very angry. Um, then, then Stephanie was on the phone with Maureen, who is over NamUs, and she says, Maureen, I'm telling you right now, 1/4 of our missing is out here living homeless. And as soon as she said that, I looked around and I said, oh my God, she's right. She's absolutely right. We stayed in California for 3 weeks, searching our homeless communities. Um,
Just to help the listeners out, but this is essentially like 2 years since her picture had been taken there, right?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes. So I'm searching throughout the homeless communities, and I can't find her. I can't find her anywhere. Um, we fed out on Skid Row one day with an outreach group. Then we also fed in Santa Monica. We did a candlelight vigil in Santa Monica. I talked to many homeless. I became friends with the homeless. Skid Row has my heart. Skid Row absolutely has my heart. But so many people throughout the homeless community wanted to help find her and said that they wish that there was somebody out there looking for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a very emotional time. And I remember being very angry at God. And I remember saying, how can you send me a photograph after 2 decades, 20 years? I haven't seen my mom, 20 years. And I come out to California and I can't find her. Everything happens for a reason, but God, I don't understand this reason. And I'm crying, I'm angry, and I don't understand. And I'm back home. It's about 6 weeks later, and it was just like it hit me all of a sudden. And I realized that there's other families. There has to be other families out there just like me. I know that there's other families. And I decided to start missing homeless. And I started asking some very dear friends, and they're from all over. They're from all over the United States. Matter of fact, I even have one that's in the UK, and there's 7 of us over missing homeless. And I asked them if they could help me with this page. And never in a million years, when I started missing homeless, did I realize it was going to grow like it did. We've got
Let's
um,
let's get back to we're going to get into that. I want to get back to talking about your mother in particular for a little bit. Did
okay,
you did you run into any homeless when you were there who knew your mother?
yes,
They had met her
quite a
or
few.
sat or been there with her or
Yes, in Santa Monica, not so much in LA, but in Santa Monica. Santa Monica is where everybody knew her. I had a shirt on that had her picture on it, um, and whenever I was walking through Santa Monica, I had a homeless guy point at me and said, "Oh my God, that's Diane," and that's also the same name that she used in the LA Times. And I had another gentleman tell me that she's still around, that I will find her, that the homeless go up and down the coast, and also in the wintertime, they may even go back and forth from Arizona, because Arizona, it's a lot warmer than it is in California in the winter. And they go back and forth like that, and they also go up and down the coast, that she was out there. Um, but I've heard a lot of things about her. I heard that the homeless community called her Ma. A lot of the young kids called her Ma, that was homeless on the streets. That she lived in McDonald's. I know that she took the bus a lot for transportation, and that she's always at the stops. I know that she used to take the bus in the wintertime to stay warm. Um, I know that in the LA Times photo, she was in a wheelchair. I didn't know if she was in a wheelchair because she had problems walking now and has a medical condition, or if she was in a wheelchair for panhandling purposes because it was easier to get money. I don't know that still to this day. Um,
mm.
and
When was the last time that when you were down there in early 2015, when was the last time that somebody had seen her in that area? How much time did you miss her by? Do you happen to remember that?
I think that I missed her by months.
Okay.
Uh, it could have been longer. I just think that I missed her by months.
You told me something very interesting. When CNN was there, that the homeless wouldn't talk to you. They didn't want
Yes.
the cameras around and everything. And you told me also about CBS and all of that, covering it as well. But as soon as those TV people went away, you came back, the homeless people couldn't have been nicer to you.
Absolutely. Yes. Whenever I went down there, CNN was down there, and the homeless did not like the cameras at all. They didn't want anything to do with us. They didn't want the cameras there. They wanted the cameras off of them. Um, I got very scared very quickly. Um, and I think that CNN made me scared because they wanted us out of there. They've already got their story. Um, they want us out of there. We get back to the van. We're waiting on CBS because CBS was supposed to meet us there shortly. CNN tells us that CBS just called them and they were affiliated, and CBS and that they gave CBS the story. So CNN was going to get the story that CBS just told us to get out of there because they are worried for our safety. We leave Skid Row. At this point, I'm crying. I'm completely freaked out. CBS calls on the phone and wants to know where we're at. And I tell them that CNN just told us that for us to leave, that you guys said that you were giving them the story. They told us that CNN lied for us to turn around. I told them that I wasn't turning around. I couldn't go back. I couldn't do an interview today. They told me that if I did not do an interview with them today, they would not interview me in the future. And they kept their word because they never interviewed me. I went back to California again in October of 2015, so about 6 or 7 months later, and CNN interviewed me a second time, and neither story has ever aired. I think that they're waiting on a reunion story. I'm not really sure, but neither story has ever aired. And that's who I needed the most, because she could be anywhere in the United States.
Does that disgust you a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. It disgusts me. If you're waiting on a reunion story, they're not going to get it. I promise. I don't care if it is CNN. It aggravates me a lot, because you want a reunion story. Why didn't you put it up when she's missing, where I might have a chance of finding her? I think that I had a huge chance of finding her if they had have ran that story, but they didn't. I mean, not only did they interview me once, they interviewed me twice, and neither story was ever put on air.
And I guess the interesting thing here is that, you say that you missed your mother there in the Skid Row area by months. To your knowledge, has she ever come back to that area since you were down there that first time?
Not to my knowledge. I do go to Santa Monica every time I go to California. I've been to California about 5 times probably in the last 2 years. We have an outreach in California now, a street outreach called Missing Homeless Feed the Need. But I have been in the area many times. As a matter of fact, they still pass out flyers in the area in LA. Every time they feed, they pass out flyers. I have friends that go to Santa Monica that still pass out flyers, but I haven't heard anything.
What do you think of that, Robin? What do you think? You think she's
Um,
moved on, or
I
what?
think that she's moved on. I also know, though, that the homeless community is a very tight-knit community. They look out for each other. They're very close-mouthed. So there could be a bunch of different things, but I think that she's not in the area anymore because other people would have seen her as well.
Could it be that she was scared off hearing about CNN and everybody being down there, maybe not realizing that you
Absolutely.
were there, but she might have been somewhere else and found out about the cameras being there, and she got out? Because I think this will lead into
Yes.
a interesting discussion about just the overall qualities of paranoid schizophrenia, which is something I want to talk to you about because I know you've learned quite a bit about it. But just that question, do you think she hasn't been back because of February
Oh,
2015?
absolutely. I could be wrong, but I don't think that there's any doubt in my mind that my mom that knows that. I really believe that my mom knows I'm looking for her. I think that my mom is scared. In her mind, she thinks that people are after her, including the ones that love her the most. And it's not true, but it's the mind of a schizophrenic. I mean, you have to get in there, and to read about it. It was just so shocking to me whenever I just started educating myself with the disease and just seeing everything that, oh my gosh, this is my mom, and very angry at myself for not knowing and for thinking the worst, thinking that she was living the life of the rich and famous all these years. And that's not true at all. I think that my mom has lived on and off the grid most of her life.
Mm-hmm.
Most of her life. I just, I don't know. It's a hard situation. We still get, to this day, I still get sightings coming in. We had a sighting come in out of Arizona. That a lady said that there was a woman that come to the bus stop in Tucson, Arizona every morning, and she was in a wheelchair, and the woman had got a car so she could put right in the bus. And when she seen my mother's flyer, she went back to the bus stop, and my mom's no longer there. She hasn't seen her. Then I got another sighting out of Dallas, Texas, of 3 or 4 weeks ago, where a woman claims that she has seen my mom at a bus stop again, and at the bus stop that she's never actually seen her get on the bus, that she's gained a lot of weight, and that her legs needed medical attention, um, and that she said that there was something that she wanted to tell me, that this woman cries all the time. And I think that the Dallas sighting has bothered me more than any other sighting, because I'm talking about it today, and I talked about it a little bit a couple of weeks ago with someone else, but I've never really let it out before. Um, but the reason that sighting bothers me is it could be just one heck of a coincidence, or this is her. The woman told me that she knows it's my mom. I asked her how she knows, and she said, because I've sat by her for the last couple of months and I know her features. I'm telling you, this is your mother. Um, she told me that this woman cries all the time and talks to herself, and she feels sorry for her, and that the woman always talks about her mother and how she blames herself for her mother's death, and how she thinks that her family also blames her for her mother's death. And that's the whole reason that I think that my mother never came back. I think that when she came back and seen that my grandmother had passed away, she thinks that she had something to do with it, it's totally not true. And so I'm not sure if this lady in Dallas was my mother. There's never been no photo taken of her. The woman's seen her every single day, and now she hasn't seen her one time since. I don't know if she's moved on someplace else. I'm not really sure, but I know that she's not in that same area anymore. And that was just like 4 weeks ago.
But you are pretty sure that your mother knows that you're looking for her. I mean, does it get to the point by thinking that she actually could be avoiding you? Is it could that
Sometimes, yeah.
schizophrenia, the paranoid schizophrenia, get that bad that if she knew that if she caught wind that you were going, whether it's to Dallas or Santa Monica, that she might go somewhere else? Is it that? Can it be that bad?
It could be that bad. I think that what bothers me more than anything is I never knew that my mom was paranoid schizophrenic. I don't even know how I missed it. So she was doing very good back then. But as the years pass and you don't take medication, I hear that schizophrenia gets worse. And also, in a lot of schizophrenia patients, dementia also sets in at a younger age. So it might even be a deal where she's kind of lost out there. But I think that in her mind, she thinks that I blame her for my grandmother's death, and that's not true at all. And I think that that's why it's so important for me to find my mom. Um, I would love nothing more for my mom to come back and live with me. I can't make her come back. The laws prohibit that, but and the HIPAA law prohibits me from telling me if she's in a shelter or telling me that she's in a hospital. But I am going to find her, because um, I just know I'm going to find her. I do something a little different. I know that um, street outreaches, they don't have to go by the HIPAA laws, and those people are our eyes out there on the streets, and those are the people that you need to contact. Those are the people that are going to tell you if they've seen her or not. Even if my mom doesn't want to come home, even if my mom doesn't want anything to do with me, my mom is going to hear me tell her to her face that I love her, and that's a fact. I don't care if it's been 22 years. She will be found. There's no doubt about it in my
Mm,
mind. I will
right.
see her again.
Yeah. Right. That's good, Robin. And you've turned this into, a mission on your own, not just for yourself, but for other people. And you've touched upon it so far, but let's get a little deeper into that if we could now. Tell the people about Missing and Homeless, what you do, the team that you have, and some of those success stories they have. Because when you told me about this, it was really amazing to me. Please tell listeners about that.
Missing Homeless was started in April 2015. It was started a month after I got back from California. I really realized really quickly that a lot of our homeless were in fact missing people. Um, I know that there was a lot of families just like me that might not have reported a missing, afraid they're going to get mad, don't afraid that they won't come back. You don't know how many families that have not reported their missing loved ones missing that have mental illness, just in fear that they're going to make their family mad at them, and they're afraid that they're not going to come back. Um, Missing homeless was started, and there's 7 of us. I have Dan Davison, who is a private investigator out of Chicago, Illinois. I have Cameo Smith. She is the niece of missing Lori Partridge, who went missing out of the 70s. I have Amy Royal, who lives in Manchester, UK. I have Dawn Nix. She's out of Florida. I have Mia Torres. She is out of California. I have Dina Rush. She's out of Washington. And all of us bring something to the table. Cameo does all of our updates and runs people to see if the social security number has been used. Amy makes all of our flyers for us. Dina helps our missing with starting on like pages to bring more awareness to our missing loved ones. Dawn Nix, she is a missing advocate out of Florida. Mia does our street outreach in California, and I just do a little bit of everything.
How did you find all these people, Robin? How did you all come together?
Well, Dawn Nix and Dan Davison has been working with me for a number of years. Dawn was actually my advocate. Dan had come aboard a few years ago. A friend introduced me to Dan. And then whenever I went to Cameo, I'd actually been friends with her through Facebook with her aunt missing. She actually helped me set up my mom's like page many years ago. Whenever I went to California, I met Cameo, and I also met Mia. Mia was who I got in contact with about feeding with her on Skid Row. So Mia and Cameo became a part of the group. Dan and Dawn, of course. Amy was just somebody that was on my mom's Facebook page that was talking to me all the time, and I just asked her one day if she would like to become a part of Missing the Homeless. She was just so good with research and doing flyers and stuff. And then Dina, Cameo had introduced me to Dina because Dina was also an avid advocate that really helped the families with the missing. And together we all came together, and we're making it work. It's been amazing. We've got close to 24,000 followers now in less than 2 years. We have found 44 people throughout the United States.
That's just the one. I want you to say that again for the listeners. How many people have you found that were homeless but are now found and reunited with their families in the last 2 years? How many?
44.
That's incredible.
Yes. And we found 2 yesterday. And it's been amazing. And we're just, miracle after miracle is being performed through our page. And it's something I can't even wrap my head around. And it gets the best of you because I'm working on Missing Homeless, and I do street outreach, and I work full time, and I just think, how am I still going? And it's whenever these loved ones get found, and it makes it all worth it, and you know why you're there and why God put this in front of you. And I had 2 amazing stories yesterday, but I had one that I just feel like God's hands was all over this. I had a man that I met almost 2 years ago, and he was homeless, and he was panhandling out by our local Walmart. He was living up underneath the bridge, and I had brought him supplies. I took his picture, and he told me about his wife, and I said we'd see if we could find her because he went to jail and she went to the hospital. Well, we had serviced him for a while, and then we couldn't find him anymore. We didn't see him for quite some time. And then here about 2 weeks ago, his son contacted our page and said that he had been trying to locate his biological father, and he had Googled his name, and our site come up, and that was his father, and he wanted to know if we knew how to get in touch with him. I told him it had been a while since I'd seen him, but I would go out and I'd look. I had been out looking for his dad, and I could not find him. And I told him, I said, I can't find him. There's a couple other places I'm going to check, but he's not in the area that he was in. And then yesterday, I got an incredible email from a lady that volunteers for Meals on Wheels, and she's outside of California, and she said, Robin, she said, I just wanted to update you on this man. She said, um, I seen your post 2 years ago where you posted about this gentleman that you'd been helping. She said, I just want to let you know he is now in California. He's on hospice. He has probably 6 months to live, but he does have shelter now. And I just want to let you know that he's off the streets. And I couldn't believe my eyes. And this is the man that I'm out here looking for right now. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, you're not going to believe this. But his son just sent us an email 2 weeks ago looking for his father. And so she gives me the gentleman's information. She gives me his name, his phone number, his address, and I get a hold of his son. I reach out to his son, and his son can't believe his ears because his son also lives in California and only lives miles from this man's home. And yesterday he was going to go see his father for the first time. So
That's a crazy, wonderful story.
yes, it's just unbelievable. We also had another story.
If I can ask you just one more question about that. This was a guy, and you live in what state? You live in.
I live in Illinois.
And you saw this guy
Panhandling.
in panhandling in Illinois. Then a couple weeks later, or however long later, he turns up in California near where his son lives.
Yes, I don't know how much later. This was almost 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
this was almost 2 years ago. His son reached out and found our post 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And then this
All right.
other lady finds the post again. So it's like 2 years ago I posted this, and within 2 weeks, not only is the son looking for him, and this lady sends me a message telling me where he is, and it was crazy.
Okay. Yeah, it's still crazy. But that somehow that
Yes.
guy was in Illinois, but then somehow he got to California, and that's where he ended up being in saw hospice. But the reunion happened yesterday.
Yes, and it's just amazing.
Wow. Yeah, tell the listeners another story, please.
We also found yesterday, here about 3 or 4 days ago, we posted about a man in Florida who is homeless. There is a street outreach there that goes by and feeds them every day, make sure that they're okay. And this man lives underneath an abandoned truck. He's originally from Hawaii. He's 63 years old. He gets a monthly Social Security check. Well, the other homeless that's in this camp with him has beat him up and would rob him at the first of the month. Once the gentleman was broke and didn't have any more money, they would leave him alone for the rest of the month. And from the first of the month, they would do it all over again. He's actually been taken to the hospital because of his injuries. The street outreach was very concerned about his well-being. They were afraid that he was going to get killed on the streets over his Social Security check, and they were trying to help him find his family. He gives us family names. They get in touch with me, wanting to know if we could help them. Yesterday, his brother in Hawaii was also found, and they are making arrangements as we speak for his brother to go out there and get him and bring him back to Hawaii.
And how long? When was the last time those two had seen each other?
It had been over 5 years.
Oh my!
Yes.
That's an amazing
So
stuff.
we
Yeah.
have loved ones out there. I do street outreach here in St. Louis. I live 15 minutes from downtown St. Louis, and we started doing outreach, and I started doing something a little different on the streets, and I started telling my mom's story every week, sometimes to the same people, and I told them, you got family out here that's looking for you and that's worried about you, and if any of you would like to find your family, come and talk to me afterwards, and we'll see if we can't help you. And we have had 6 of our homeless now come up and ask for help in finding their family, and we have found 5 out of the 6. One gentleman, actually 2 gentlemen, had been missing over 20 years. The families thought that they were dead. So it's incredible. So this is where I say to all of our viewers and supporters, do not give up on our missing. They are out there. It's so unbelievable. The best way to not be found in the United States is to become homeless. because you are invisible. No one sees you, no one recognizes you, no one pays attention to you. I
Do
remember.
you think that's why? Uh, I mean, this is not. How do I want to put this? You're doing great work, but you're finding, like, I guess you work this out to two people a month in the last, roughly 45 people in 24 months. That almost is two people a month. That is great results. It,
Yes.
do, do you think you're having these results? Obviously, you're doing great work, but you're also having these results because not a lot of other people are doing it. Is that part of it as well, or what do
I
you think
think
you're
so.
doing differently that maybe other people in the past haven't? Because I don't know of any other people who have had much success as you have had in the last 2 years.
I think that we're bringing awareness for the first time to our missing, that if you have a missing loved one that is addicted to drugs or have any kind of mental health issues, may it be schizophrenia or dementia or Alzheimer's or bipolar, PSD. I mean, a lot of them are out here on the streets. I'm not saying everyone, but a majority of them. I mean, you would be surprised at the numbers. Even people that's been in car accidents, that's had amnesia or brain injuries, they are out here on the streets. Whenever their car has been wrecked and they can't be found, they're gone. Some of them have suffered brain injuries, and they're out on the streets. You would be amazed at how many people are out on the streets that are just lost out here. And I think that we're bringing awareness. But I think that another thing that I've learned, and I mean, we're still using flyers, so don't get me wrong, but when I like to actually talk to the families, and whenever I talk to the families and like get their story, and I sit down and I share those stories with their photograph, and it's just, I guess, with me telling the story, with it being their picture, the story comes to life, and it's not just like another missing person that they're scrolling by and not sharing. It takes only 1 second to share, but I've actually done this, and I've done the exact same story, one with a picture and one with a flyer. The picture was shared about 40 or 50 times. I'm sorry, not the picture, the flyer. The flyer was shared 40 or 50 times. The picture, on the other hand, would be shared 150 times. It would be like double or triple that amount. And I was just amazed by that the picture is getting shared more than a flyer is. No,
Hmm.
we still share flyers, though, don't get me wrong, but it's just, I'm just so surprised by that.
Any insight into that? Why that is?
Um, I think that it brings the person more to life. That it's more of a person than just how somebody else's went missing. And then whenever you talk to those families and get their stories, and they're telling you from the heart, and you write those stories down on paper, and then you get those stories and you write those stories up on missing homeless. You bring that person to life. It's just not like, well, Jane went missing walking home from school today. Well, now you have a story that says Jane's family is really desperate to find their daughter. Um, she loved to play soccer. Um, this is who this kid was, and we are really needing the public's help in finding this person. That's going to get shared more than the first story. It's just, I think it's all in how you word it, and like putting the pictures up there for some reason, they're just getting shared more than the flyers. I've that.
And that's consistent. Every you find that every time.
I would say most of the time, yes.
Okay. Now we had an interesting conversation. This is something that I think the listeners are going to be a little surprised by. I had asked you what is one of the hindrances for these cases to be sold or to be solved. I'm sorry, to be solved. And you said the HIPAA laws, and you touched upon that before in our discussion. Tell the listeners what you mean by that.
Our HIPAA law is our Privacy Act, and it was signed in Constitution a long time ago. That it's been revised a little bit, and it's hurt us instead of helped us in many ways. I'm not here to try to change your privacy or my privacy, but I'm trying to change the privacy of the missing. Whenever you go missing and your family's out there looking for you, especially in cases where they're lost out on the streets, the ones that are mentally ill, you can go in, are even though they are a legally missing person with the police department, you can walk in to a shelter they could be at that shelter, but that shelter cannot tell you because they could lose their job. Um, Now, I have been into shelters where they let you walk around the day room to see if you see them, but they cannot tell you if they're there. Um, I've had that you can go to the hospitals. Hospitals can't tell you anything. I have so many people saying, "Well, send a flyer to the shelters. Have you asked the shelters?" Well, I can ask the shelters all day long and send their flyers all day long to the shelters, but just because I've sent the shelters, they cannot tell me anything. Our eyes are our street outreach, and it seems like our street outreach is the only one that we can actually go to out here for help, because the shelters cannot tell you anything. The soup kitchens cannot tell you anything. It is our street outreach. Our street outreach are our eyes. The people that are out on the street, those are our eyes. And it's a sad situation. It's hindering so many families from finding their loved ones. I understand about the HIPAA laws, and I know that it's going to hurt, like the woman that's been beat up, that's been reported missing, where her husband's trying to find and kill her. They're set up for incidents like that. But what about the mentally ill that's just really lost? I mean, it's a catch-22. It's very sad and frustrating for so many family members.
What trouble can these places get in if they break that privacy? What is the penalty? I know it probably varies from state to state, but how serious is that violation?
I'm not real sure as far as what the penalty would be, but I do know that they will lose their job for that. I know that they would get fired and termination immediately. I'm not sure of what other penalties that there is, but I know that it is against the law for them to disclose any of that information.
So it's more of an employee thing. They want to keep their jobs. And then on top of that, it's also that there are laws in each state that they have to keep their mouth shut.
Absolutely.
And it could be, I don't know if it'd be jail time, but there could be a fine or something like that.
Yes.
It's really weird how those things work. I think most people, I think your average person, they talk about HIPAA laws, they understand the privacy, and they want that, but then it's weird how then that gets in the way of good work like you're doing.
Right. And it's a sad situation all the way around for everybody, and not just for me, for other family members. There's so many families out there just like me that are running into these running into the brick walls with these HIPAA laws, and you just want to scream and pull your hair out, and you got to keep going. You got to find ways around it, and that's why I stress to people so much. Find out who your outreaches are. They are all over the United States. You've got to find them. They're under different names. I put something on Facebook here maybe about a month and a half ago, asking if you're a street outreach, can you put where you're from in the name of your street outreach? And the reason that I'm asking them that is because if we have somebody missing in that area, or we want to be able to send it to that outreach. Have you seen this girl or this gentleman on the street? Because those are our eyes, and we want to find as many outreaches as we possibly can, because that's who's going to help us.
Have you started trying to do anything, talk to any state state legislators about this, about changing that particular part of the law? Is that in the plans for missing and homeless?
Well, it's actually funny that you mentioned that. I have a lady that works with the healthcare system, and she is out of New Jersey, and she wants to fly down to St. Louis to meet me, and I've actually asked her if they could fly into Chicago. Deanne lives in Chicago, and that way we can just meet them together. But they want to talk about our HIPAA laws and what we can do to revise them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that. I mean, you are having so much success, Robin. You are, finding all of these people that I think these people are going to have to listen to you because you really know your stuff. You and your team are doing great work. You're getting results. I think they have to listen to you. I mean, if you can convince them that you could double that number if the HIPAA laws are just changed just a little bit, I mean, that would be a big deal.
It would be a very big deal. It would be a very, very big deal for so many families. Like I said, I knew about homeless, but I didn't know about homeless, and there are so many people out there lost. I mean, it's a sad situation. I had a case, Jason Diaba, his mother I was in California, and his mother had asked for help in finding her son, and I got a phone call from a lady in Texas that I'm very good friends with. She runs a page called Victim News Online, and she said, Robin, while you guys are out in California, is there any way that you could share Jason Diablo's flyer? And we get these flyers, and I get them ran off, and we're passing out my flyers, we're passing out Jason's flyers. Jason's also from Illinois, also supposed to be missing in the California area, and also with mental illness. The case was a lot like my mom. We go to California. Of course, we didn't find either one. I get back home, and I become very good friends with his mother. And we talk on the phone, and we're each other's support group. And I said, get your name off. I said, get the police's name off the flyers. I said, I know this is going to sound crazy. I said, but I put my own cell phone number on there. And I said, I do that because if my mom is found and all she has to say is, I am not a missing person, and she gets taken out of the system immediately.
Mm.
And with our numbers on the flyer, they're going to call us for sightings. Well, a girl seen, she changed the flyers to her cell number. A homeless girl had seen her son, had videotaped him, had sent the videos to his mother. His mother knows it's him. She gets a flight to California that's going to leave the very next day. She gets a knock at the door around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's the state police. Now, she's getting ready to leave for the airport here in the next couple hours. The state police letting her know that they've just found her son in San Diego, California, that he has been put into the hospital. He didn't even know who the president of the United States was. She flies out to California. She goes to the hospital to see her son, and they won't allow her to see him because of the HIPAA laws, because he doesn't want to see her. He doesn't want anything to do with her. He's saying all kinds of crazy stuff that's not true. Now she's worried to death because they only have to keep them for 15 days. After 15 days, they're let out of the hospital back on the streets to live homeless. She goes in front of a judge, and she gets an extension, an extra 30 days. So now he's in there for 45 days. It's an extra 30-day extension. He still won't see her the whole time that she's there. She goes home. Now he's in there, and he's taking his medicine like he's supposed to. Jason is now home with his mom, and he's doing great. He's doing great.
Wow.
But it takes more than 15 days for that medication to work.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
I
just
see.
not
Yes,
enough
I see
time.
what you're saying. I see what you're saying now. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, so yeah,
Right.
15 days, and they're put right back on the streets. Right?
Yeah.
We're right back to square one.
Whereas if it's longer, if it's like 30 days, the medicine
Yes.
then eventually kicks in maybe at 21 days or 25 days. And
Right.
then he's like, well, yeah, I do want to see my mother. Now that I'm thinking right and everything, of course I want to see my mother. But off the medication,
Yes, he didn't want anything to do with her.
he didn't want to have anything to do with her or anybody else for that matter.
Right.
Right.
It was
Let's
just,
let's turn this back to your mother now, Robin. What's the next step for you in trying to find her?
I just keep sharing. I keep sharing and praying and hoping that I can find her. We just started a new like page actually, for Dallas, looking for her just in that area. Maybe she's still somewhere in Texas. Maybe she's moved on. I do know growing up that the 3 states that actually there was 4 that my mom really liked to travel to, and it was Nevada, California, Arizona, and Texas. Those are places that I know that she's been more than once, numerous different times. But she could be anywhere in the United States, and that's the sad part. And it's just like I don't even know where to look anymore. And all I can keep doing is sharing her flyer and praying that somebody has seen her, somebody knows her, and somebody's going to reach out and say, and it really be her, and take a photo, snap a photo without her knowing it somehow. Make sure that she has brown eyes and they're not blue. But get those photos to me, and I promise you, wherever she's at, I'm going to be on the very next plane out of here.
Yeah.
I love my mother with all my heart, and like I said, I cannot make her come home with me, but she sure is going to hear me tell her how much I love her.
Very good. Robin, tell everybody where they can find you, your website, Facebook page, how they get in contact with you, if you have Twitter, whatever you're doing, give your contact information out to the listeners, please.
Okay, we have actually a Facebook page and we have Twitter. Our email address is missinghomeless.org. I'm sorry, that's not right. missinghomeless@gmail.com. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Our um, our Facebook page is Missing and Homeless, and it's not A&D, it's the little letter and. You can find my mom's page. It's under Cloudia Leslie Wells Missing Person. Cloudia is spelled with a Cloudia. It's like Claudia instead of Claudia. And my name is Robin Wells Burton. You can also find me on Facebook. And I'm just out here to tell the families, if you need help, we're here to help you as best as we can. And it's not just us. I mean, we're out here trying to update the page and putting new things on the page. But it's our listeners, it's our supporters, it's all these likes and these shares and these comments. Each time they like a post, and each time they comment on a post, that puts that post back into the news feed. Each time that flyer or picture is shared, you might not know them, but it doesn't mean that your neighbor doesn't know them. Social media is such a great tool. It's such a great tool, and it's just everybody out here working together. And like a friend of mine told me a long time ago, it takes a village. It's one person at a time. We're out here to make a difference, and we're all out here doing it together. It's more than just our team. It's every single one of you guys.
Well, I hope the listeners will try to help you out in some way, especially those listeners who live in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Texas, but particularly the Dallas area. And hopefully, I don't want to say get lucky, but hopefully God will be shining down on one of these people, maybe see your mother. That would be great.
That would be absolutely amazing.
Right. Robin, thank you for joining me and the listeners on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you so much for having me today.
And that was my interview with Robin Wells Burton, the daughter of Cloudia Leslie Wells. We started off this episode talking about hope, and I really thought I needed to bring that to the program this week after the last few weeks of talking about not just one, not two, but three young men who disappeared in the Gulf of Mexico back in 1994. And in fact, since Unfound has started, we've covered a lot of very bleak cases. So I thought you needed to hear a story, a kind of different story, where the person who has disappeared is actually still alive. There's proof of that. And then there's a person looking for a missing person who is also spreading hope to other people. What I wanted to try to get across with this episode is that hope is out there, although it's not easy to find. But that doesn't mean that there aren't wonderful things happening in the world of missing persons every day. People are being found all the time. I guess maybe we just don't hear about it all the time. And Robin's situation is a great example. She went from being angry with her mother to finding out that her mother had a serious mental disease, to deciding that she was going to find her mother at any cost, and then actually discovering just a few years ago that her mother is still alive. And I really believe that Robin is going to find her mother. I really believe that. And either way, she's not going to give up hope. But also the work that she is doing, Robin is doing with missing and homeless, she is spreading so much hope out there as well. Over 40 people reunited in 2 years. I want to know, is there any police department having so much success? It's an impressive stat. And I think Robin is showing that it doesn't take a ton of money or the law or anything like that to reunite people. All it takes is people who care and people who have hope. A few notes about the interview. I had told you beforehand that there were some facts about this disappearance that were wrong. You now know what those were. Cloudia was never in the military. She was never at that VA clinic in LA where she was last sighted. She was not getting any medicine there. I wanted you to hear that from Robin herself, and she gave you an explanation as to how that information might have been distorted. And frankly, she's been trying to correct the record ever since. So I hope you will all do her a favor if you happen to see that incorrect information on a website or you hear it on another program, if some other podcast covers this disappearance at some point. I hope you'll please let that host or website owner know that the correction needs to be made. Also, a listener asked me this past week, somewhat coincidentally, what if a missing person doesn't want to be found? In the case of Cloudia disappearing, Robin expressed the idea that it very well may be that Cloudia is avoiding her daughter because she thinks that she may be bringing harm to Robin if those two are reunited. And generally, I would say you let the person be if the person does not have a mental issue like it seems like Cloudia does. And in fact, Robin gave us the example she knew about of a young man who had some mental problems, and he was homeless, and he was brought into the hospital. And he was there for several days claiming that he didn't want to see his mother. But once he was put on the proper medication, he was able to say, well, of course I want to see my mother. And that's when we had our discussion about HIPAA laws and how hospitals in many of these cases should keep these patients longer than they do. 15 days is not enough, if you remember that from the interview. So to answer that listener's question and to clarify the position given what went on in this interview, if the person is leaving his or her life and knows what he or she is actually doing, is in a good state of mind, as long as they aren't breaking the law, as long as it's not a situation like a deadbeat dad or something, I have no problem with that. But if the person is obviously mentally incapacitated in a situation like we had here with Cloudia, I'm going to have to answer this listener's question by saying it just depends. It just depends. I think that just looking at it from the outside, what I think I know about Robin, what I think I know about this case, it seems that both Cloudia and Robin would be better off if they were reunited and Cloudia got the help that she needed. There is going to be other situations where people leave their lives, whether they're battered women or whatever the case may be. Then, of course, if they want to disappear from that man who is harming them, then, of course, they have every right to do that. The other point I'd like to mention regarding the interview is about mental illness in general. I think we're discovering year by year that mental illness plays much more of a factor than any of us can even begin to imagine in many disappearances. Probably in many disappearances where we dismiss it as something else, a suicide, a murder. And very well could be that those people that we think are gone really aren't. They just happen to be living on the streets now. I'm not sure if there is any stat to support this, but I have to believe that it's true. I guess what I'm saying is if we could get a handle on homelessness and mental illness, we would probably solve a lot more missing persons cases. In fact, we'd probably have a lot less of them. But as long as we can figure out new ways to solve these problems, to solve these cases, like Robin is doing, like she's been doing for the last couple years, then there'll always be hope. I thank you for listening. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Dentzel, and you've been listening to Unfound.